Welcome to episode 35 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be talking with writer-director David Jung. He's been working as a writer for years and recently just completed writing and directing his first feature film, The Possession of Micheal King. He's very open about everything, and we really dig into the details about how he broke into the business and got a chance to direct his first feature film. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast. I'd like to thank all the folks over on Twitter who retweeted some of the recent episodes. Thanks Wheelin' and Dealin' of Time, Pedro Vasquez, Ink Moves, Romana Robinson, Ludovic Williams, Nara Ryder, and Mia Koth. I really appreciate it. Too, if I did miss you, it's not that easy to see exactly who's retweeted you in the last week, so I really do appreciate all the retweets, and hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I got a bunch of nice comments over on YouTube on episode 33. Thank you Thomas J. Ryan, Somerville Bob, Julianne Bullock, Phil Hay, and Stanford Crane. And the Selling Your Screenplay Facebook seems to have come alive in the last week or so. So check that out if you're on Facebook. It's facebook.com/sellingyourscreenplay. So thank you, Thomas J. Ryan, Benjamin Lewis, Patrick Pond, Maurice Cabrero, Kyrie Mallon, Frank Davis, Shelley Piano, and Andrew Spearer for commenting and liking the posts over the last week. And a big thanks to Jack Sikowski, who left me a very nice comment in iTunes. Thanks, Jack. Jack is actually a writer who I met in my writers group a few years ago, and he's actually optioned a script using my email and fax blast service. So I'll have to have him on the show soon to talk about his career. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts. And then just look for episode 35. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A few quick words about what I'm working on. I've got a few things brewing, but the main thing this week for me is finishing up a limited location sci-fi thriller script. I got notes last week from my writers group and have been trying to get them implemented this past week. I should be ready to start sending the script out hopefully next week. I'm also meeting a producer later this week about writing a script based on one of his original ideas. There are some logistical things to work out, but I'm looking forward to really hearing what his idea is and if I'm a good fit for writing it. So now let's get into the main segment. This week I'm talking with writer-director David Jung about his career as a screenwriter and his directorial debut, The Possession of Micheal King. Here is the interview. Welcome, David, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here today.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career in the entertainment industry, kind of how you got to where you are today.
Well, I came out to Los Angeles in the late 90s. I had gone to film school in Ithaca University, Ithaca College, and didn't really know how I was going to get a job out here in LA. And I was in Santa Monica, and I saw a truck pulled over on the side of the road, and guys were unloading giant fake trees from it and fake shrubbery and bushes, and I thought, wow, gee, it must be a movie set that these guys are walking onto. So I got out of my car and I stepped in line, this assembly line of guys carrying stuff, and walked up to the truck and picked up a tree and followed the group onto set, and I set it down, and somebody walked over and said, hey, before you head back out to the truck, can you adjust the barn doors on the baby son and put some quarter CTO over here, and, gave me a whole list of things, and I nodded and said, yeah, no problem. And then I walked over to some guy and I said, hey, what are C47s, and what's quarter CTO, and what are the barn doors, and what's the baby son? And He's like, well, C-47s are, basically the clips that hold the CTO, which is a orangish gel on the front of a light, and the barn doors are what, direct the light open and closed, and that's over there. So I went and I did that, and I ended up working a 22-hour day on this movie. And at the end of the day, somebody walked up to me. It was a producer or the director or somebody said, look, I don't know who the hell you are or where you came from or how you got on here, but you really did a great job today. Do you want a job on this movie? I said, yeah, of course I want a job in this movie. So it was Roger Corman Studios in Santa Monica, which is Concord New Horizons Studios, was no longer there. And I ended up making 6 movies with Roger Corman, and it was a great experience. I mean, better than any film school experience. I shot, second unit camera. I did a lot of grip work and electrical work. I was a first AD. I was, all through the gambit. But after doing about 6 films there, I felt that I was never going to, be able to rise up out of doing low budget grip and electric work on movies like this. So I quit and I took a non-paid internship at Walt Disney Studios, at Hunt Lowry Productions. And I worked there. I forget what movie he was doing. He was doing a Matthew McConaughey movie that was based on a Grisham book. And I forget which one it was. But I worked there for 6 months, and then I got a job at Mandeville Films, which was David Hoberman's company. And I rose up the ranks there, first as a creative executive, and then director of development, and then I was a vice president there. And we did like George of the Jungle, The Negotiator, Sixth Sense, and the whole string of movies. I left there to run the film department at Film Roman for a while, which does King of the Hill and The Simpsons, and then I was an executive at Paramount for a while, where I had actually written a script with a friend of mine as more of a practice to learn as an executive how better to work with writers, because my job was solely as a development executive developing scripts with writers. So I felt I had to write something myself to learn more about the process. And the story that I wrote was based on an old short story from the 1920s called Lineagen versus the Ants, which is a great story, which was made into a radio show in the 40s. And then Charlton Heston did a movie in the late 60s, early 70s called The Naked Jungle. But a friend of mine, Roy Lee, who's a big producer in Los Angeles now, called me and said, hey, I see you have a copyright on a script based on Lineagen versus the Ants. I'm really interested in doing a movie based on that. Can I read the script? I said, well, I'm not really a writer. I just wrote this, as practice, and I've never shown it to anybody. So I said, let me think about it. I gave the script to my good buddy who I was working with, Greg Hoffman. And I said, look, I don't want to be some kind of asshole executive that suddenly turns into a writer that's, sending scripts out around town. It's like, it'll make me look foolish. Will you just do me a favor and read this, please, and tell me if I'm an idiot for letting anybody read this thing? Because I don't want it to get out there if I'm going to look foolish. So he came in the next day and he said, look, he's like, I don't think you should give this script to Roy. 2 things. One, I want to produce the script. I want you to give it to me. And 2, I'm leaving Paramount to start a new company, and we're doing a Wesley Snipes movie, and it needs a page 1 rewrite. I want you to quit your job here, and I want you to rewrite the Wesley Snipes movie for me.
Wow.
So I left Paramount with my writing partner at the time, who I'd written the script with, and we wrote the movie for them, and we went on and we started writing movies. I wrote, and sold movies to New Line and the Weinstein Company and Dimension and, all over the place. After a while, we did that I wrote the Dirty Harry video game for Clint Eastwood, which was probably one of the greatest compliments I was ever given in my life. Clint Eastwood said to me, I was going to make one more Dirty Harry film, be based on your story. He loved the story that I wrote for the video game.
Nice.
But then, it was tough. We would sell a lot of scripts, but they would sit at the studio and they wouldn't get made. And it became very frustrating. My partner, at the time was very, such a perfectionist that we would end up rewriting the same thing, over and over and over again, instead of getting more material out there. And I would say, in terms of advice for a screenwriter, your work is never done. It's like, it's like a piece of art. A script is never finished. It's just abandoned. So, you need to have material. You need to have a lot of material. Because all of the stuff that's your favorite stuff is the stuff that nobody's going to give a shit about, and it's going to be that script that you're like, oh, like this stupid little script, and I had this idea, and you write it, and then boom, somebody wants it. That's the one. So sure, there's a degree of, you need to be a good writer. You need to be professional. You need to have a voice. You need to know how to structure things. You need to know how to tell a story. But at the same time, a lot of what people are looking for in Hollywood, you could have the most refined, piece of material. If nobody's interested in that story, it's going to sit somewhere forever, and you could have the most unrefined thing, which is a big idea, that is horribly written and horribly executed, that you're going to have 5 offers on. So, part of what I felt like, we'd gotten into the trap of spending way too much time on the same pieces of material instead of spreading our wings a little bit. So, we decided to kind of go our separate ways, and remain very good friends. But the first thing that I wrote on my own, which was really frightening, because I felt like, he's much smarter than I am across the board. I felt like my partner was a much better writer than I was, and that was a crutch that I had, that I could depend on him to fix the things and do the things, and it was scary to be on my own. And the first thing that I wrote was this project called Port Royal, which is a pirate show, and it came out really, really well, and I sold it to Showtime with David Duchovny and Taya Leone attached to it. And the second thing that I wrote on my own was The Possession of Micheal King. And that came out of a desire to, this background of writing movies that didn't get made. I'm like, I want to write a low-budget horror movie that I can direct, and that I can do on a small enough budget that if nobody gives me money for it, I can shoot it on a crappy camera in my backyard with members of my family and just make
Perfect.
this. Like,
let me stop you right there, and I'm sorry. Let me stop you right there and back up a little bit. We're going to get into The Possession of Micheal King here in a minute, but let me just go back. So you're going to film school, and I'm curious, did you take a lot of screenwriting classes? Like, by the time you became a development executive, did you have some sort of writing chops, at least development chops? You understood story structure. Where did you pick that stuff up?
I think to a degree, when I look back throughout my life, I've always been interested in reading. I've always excelled at reading. I've always been, school, I was an awful student, across the board on a lot of stuff, and I only excelled at the things that I liked. I was an awful math student, awful science student, but reading always came, naturally to me. It was a little bit easier for me because I liked reading stories and I could get into it. I found it enjoyable to sit back and read. So I had a dual major in college, which was film and literature. So I did kind of, while I wasn't specifically targeting writing or becoming a writer, I always had a love for reading, and, so I think I brought that to the table. And when I came to Los Angeles, and I didn't really know what role I wanted to play in filmmaking. I think deep down inside, I always really wanted to direct movies. I was kind of scared to take that leap, because if you want to get married and have a family and live in a normal life and, in a house and not on the street in a gutter somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
like being an artist, it's scary. It's not a 9 to 5 job that you get a paycheck every week. So I was a little frightened to just try to take that leap. I looked at a studio job as a more steady source of income. If I could get that job and work at a studio, like I have health insurance and I have a 401k and they pay me every week and I have an expense account. And so it was, I don't know if I just kind of fell down that road, but it was the road that felt a little more secure to me. In retrospect, I look back and kind of wish, it's like, man, I wish I just went out and made a movie, but if I did that, I wouldn't have had the years of reading. What was nice about being a studio executive was that my job was primarily reading scripts and analyzing scripts and writing coverage on scripts. So I read morning, noon, night. Every night I would take 10 scripts home with me. And the first thing the next morning, I was expected to give, sit down in a staff meeting and give a report on all 10 of those scripts.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they a good movie? Why are they a bad movie? Why would this work? Why would it not work? What are the pros and cons? Who could we cast in it? How much money would it cost? Where would we sell it? What's the marketplace for it? And it started to make me think about, the commercial aspect of the movie business. And, as an artist or an outsider, it's like, well, I don't want to make this uber commercial movie. I want to make something that's interesting. It's like, yeah, well, you need to make a movie that people are going to see so that it makes enough money that you can finance the movie so that you can make another movie. So if you don't have that commercial aspect to it, then you're not going to succeed, and even really artistic, movies, there is a commercial aspect to them, whether it's the character that you're learning about or, the person or the style of it, or they're doing something different or, that's attracting a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So I think in a weird way, it helped me learn about that. And it also helped me learn about, I remember one of the first ideas I had, and I always had ideas for movies. And first ideas I had when I was working at Disney for the superhero story. If I go back and I look at the treatment for it, or what I thought was a treatment, while I'll still look at it and say, okay, it was wildly creative and there's a lot of interesting things, I now realize why my friend who was working there, who was a more senior, executive at the time, looked at it and sat me down and gave me feedback on it that hurt a little bit, and I was like, God, it's like, did they just not understand the story? And it's like, no, they actually had a really good sense of story structure that I hadn't developed yet, and that I needed to develop. And, working, in a production company and in a studio environment for a number of years and, reading as much and analyzing as much as I did, I think it really, really helped in terms of naturally building kind of, the story structure and learning how to write the way that I write now.
I think it's interesting. You said your first screenplay, at this point you were a fairly seasoned executive, but you were not able to read it yourself and tell whether it was good or not.
Yeah. So you become so close to the material, and you become so passionate about, what it is that you're doing. It's like I grew up with the story, and my friend who co-wrote it with me grew up with the story as well. And it's, it was a difficult story to get off the ground. It's, a period piece, South America, it's about a plantation owner whose plantation is overrun with man-eating army ants. So it's about one of the toughest movies to get out. So it's like a period horror film, like uber expensive period drama horror. It's like, okay, well, who's going to make that movie? Unless at the time, you have Harrison Ford, starring in it. This was like 15 years ago, or you have Spielberg directing it. It's like, how are you going to raise the finances for that movie? So, but it was great that, we both loved the character and the story enough that it drove us to write this script based on it. And it became a really great learning experience. I still look back at that script as, if I step away from it and go back to it, I'm like, I still really like the script. It's still a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've grown immeasurably as a writer since then.
Yeah. So let's talk about this first assignment. So you show this spec script to your friend, he really likes it, and then he hires you to do this this rewrite. Just give us some sort of like chronology of, okay, so you get hired to do this thing. At this point, you're pretty well connected. Did you get an agent? Did you get a manager? And then how did you start to get some of these writing assignments and sell some of these spec scripts?
So at this point, he offered us this job to rewrite this movie, and it was intense because they wanted to go into production. They had the financing lined up. It was a $30 million movie, a motorcycle movie. Like, think the Warriors but on motorcycles. So Wesley Snipes and his motorcycle gang, going through like 3 different states and facing off with different motorcycle gangs and stuff on the way. Lots of action, lots of high-speed chases. The problem was they needed the rewrite in 2 weeks. And it was a page 1 rewrite. So basically, throw the script out, completely reinvent it, completely redo it. We need it delivered in 2 weeks. I was living
Did they have some ideas about what they wanted you to it was a page 1 rewrite, but did they have some ideas on the direction you should go?
Very, very loosely. We had to sit down and come up with the whole story and all the set pieces, all the characters. We had to do the whole thing. And it was, you couldn't get thrown into the fire any more than I was thrown into the fire for this assignment. Going from having written 1 screenplay over the course of, probably months and months and probably a year of refining this 1 script that we just worked on to, okay, you guys need to come up with a whole new take on this and write it in 2 weeks and deliver it, and it's got to be ready to shoot. Mm-hmm. So the stress level was very high. I was living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, underneath this crazy Hasidic family with like 15 kids that were above me, that were like up all hours of the night and day, like stomping on the floor with like clogs on their feet or something. This was like this rattling. Think the Blues Brothers, Elwood's apartment in the Blues Brothers. It has the train go past it, like every 30 seconds. He's like, yeah, it happens so often you'll forget about it after a minute. That's where I was living. And my partner, Steve, moved in on the couch for the 2 weeks that we had to do this. We had a coffee pot running 24/7. And we were writing back to back, day and night, and we would like tag team. Every once in a while, one of us would have to go get a couple hours of sleep, and then show back up, and then the other one would get a couple hours of sleep. And it was, we reached a point. I don't know how we did it. I don't know how. I haven't looked at that script in so long. I have no idea if it makes sense or not. I have no idea what happened. We delivered it. We made it happen. We willed it to happen somehow. And it's a testament to the fact that you hear some of these crazy legends of guys that Quentin Tarantino wrote From Dusk Till Dawn, on a cocaine-fueled weekend, back in whenever. And it's like, yeah, maybe he did. Maybe it is possible. I don't know. We wrote this thing in 2 weeks that I never thought was going to be possible. It was really trying, and it was really difficult, and we were definitely wanted to kill each other at the time. And
so if they had financing, what happened to the movie once you had the script done?
Well, what happens to a lot of movies is we delivered the script. Everybody signed off on the script, was ready to go. Wesley Snipes decided that instead of making a $30 million action movie, which is what they would give him $30 million for, he wanted to make a $30 million road documentary with just him and his buddies on the road on motorcycles driving around.
Like an Easy Rider type of thing.
Well, like an Easy Rider type of thing, yeah. And they're like, Wesley, we're not going to give you $30 million to do that movie. you were on board doing this. Like, you've been on board every step of the process. We wrote this great action movie, which is why we have the financing for this. It's like, it doesn't work that way. So, they ended up at loggerheads. Wesley Snipes is incredibly talented as an actor. I think he's made some poor choices, and his career has really suffered for it. But sadly, this movie, it never got off the ground. It's like, and it's a great example of what happens to, a lot of writers, and what happened to me, which made me eventually decide I wanted to direct a movie, was that this was the beginning of a long road of things that, as a writer with my partner, we were constantly on the 1 yard line. We were constantly had a movie, had a thing. It's like about to go, and then an outside force would come in and tear it to pieces. Like the studio would collapse, or the person that championed it would leave and go someplace else, or the financing would disappear, or the actor would drop out, or like something would shift. And you put in all this hard work, and you bend over backwards to make it happen, and then for reasons completely out of your control, and completely out of the control of whether or not the project is a good project or not. And you start to realize the sad reality. People, outside of Hollywood are always saying, well, how come Hollywood makes so many bad movies? How come there's so much crap comes out? How come they just can't make a good movie? Like, there's all these good scripts out there. How come they don't get made? It's like outside circumstances, man. It's like they dictate why things get made, why they don't get made. And, it's never the choice of the writer. Let me tell you, the writer is the lowest guy on the totem pole. The writer is the last guy that gets asked, what script should be made or what shouldn't be made, or what choices you're forced to make. Like I could tell you stories like, another movie we were doing, Solomon Kane, based on the Robert E. Howard character. Robert E. Howard, who wrote Conan and Red Sonja, all these great characters. My favorite was Solomon Kane, and we tracked down these guys, the Barrow brothers in Europe. They had held the rights to the Robert E. Howard estate, and we set the project up with Don Murphy at New Line Studios. Don Murphy, Samuel Hadida ended up getting involved, who has a French company, and ended up taking over the project. And we had written the movie to take place in colonial North America, with Native American Indians and a lot of the mythology behind all of that, bleeding into the supernatural elements of that, with this Puritan character that's here traveling down, through the colonies. So we're, the script is done. We're, months, a few months away from like going into production. And we had lunch with Samuel Hadida at Shutters here in Santa Monica. And he said, now what if we just change the location, from North America to Africa? So instead of Lighthouse in America, it's Lighthouse in Africa. And instead of, colony in America, it's colony in Africa. And we're like, Samuel, there were no lighthouses in Africa. There were no colonies like this in Africa. There were no, like, this Puritan, it's like, we could write a movie based in Africa with this character, but, the mythology that we had was, they're going to, Bimini, which is off the coast of Florida, which is where the Fountain of Youth was supposed to be. And we had a really cool twist on what the Fountain of Youth was and why it was there. And we're like, all of this leads into, a lot of things that, backgrounds that we're pulling from actual mythology that take place in the, in the colonies. So, we can't just, it won't make any sense. And he literally looked at me and he said, you don't want to write it? Fuck you. I was the writers to write it. And I looked at my partner, I'm like, did that just happen? Like, is lunch over then? Like, are you still paying for lunch? Like, what happens now? I'm like, all right, well, so it's like we suck it up and we just write shit and put our names on it, and like you go make this movie to get a movie made, and it won't make any sense. And people say like, yeah, Like David Jung, like, this guy has no idea how to make a story work because the story makes no sense at all, man. It takes place in a lighthouse in Africa with like Native American Indians running around and the quest for the fountain of youth. Like, didn't this guy read anything? And I'd be like, I read everything. Like, literature is my life, which this is not the way the movie was supposed to take place. Like, this is not the story I wanted to tell. I know it doesn't make any sense. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So
let's go. Let's just go. Let's go to. So you have this first writing assignment. Just give us some steps. Sort of what happened after that. How did you get an agent, and then how did that start to blossom into all these other spec sales and writing assignments from that first writing assignment? Because it sounds like that took place so quick. There was no time for getting an agent and manager. What did you do after that?
You've got to remember, I was in kind of a unique situation. Because I was an executive, I was a studio executive for a number of years. So I knew all these agents, mm-hmm. they were all, friends of mine. And I had a really good friend of mine who really loved my writing and really believed in it. And he just got behind it and sent that first script that I wrote to, a handful of different agents. And, I knew them all, and it was the kind of thing that the only hurdle that I had was I didn't feel comfortable sending my own work to people that I knew and worked with as, hey, you guys should rep me now as a writer, and I know mm-hmm. we're friends and all. But I had a friend of mine that really believed in my writing that was also an executive, and it was very easy for us, to just because we knew everybody. So he said, you know what? It's like, you didn't know this, but DJ, which is my nickname, he's like, DJ wrote a script and it's amazing and you need to read it. And he's now writing this Wesley Snipes movie. And, I had 5 different meetings with 5 different agents at, 5 different agencies. Same thing with managers. And it was really just about picking and choosing. Yeah. So I had a very unique scenario.
Mm-hmm. And then they were able to get you out and to the production companies and start getting you assignments from there, basically.
Yeah. So basically, the first thing that happens with, an agent or a manager, it's, managers are more about shaping your career, and like what's important to you. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What types of things do you want to be writing and doing? And let's figure out how to make you as happy and as successful as possible. Your agent is much more, give me something to sell. Give me something to sell. Sell. Give me more material. So what you're basically given is you come in and you have a piece of material, and they'll send that material to production companies all over town. Let's say we have a new writer, and you should familiarize yourself with them because, he's very talented and blah, blah, blah. And then you'll take meetings at all of these places. And a lot of times it's just a waste of time. You go in and meet somebody and sit down and what are you writing and what are you guys doing here? And nothing comes from it. Sometimes if they really, really like you as a writer, they may have a project that they're doing that they need a writer on so they can offer you something. And in that case, you'll have to spend a month of your time for free coming up with a take on their project, and you'll have to go in, pitch them, a 25-minute version of their movie, from beginning to end, and they'll have notes on it, and you'll have to go back home, and you'll have to adjust all those notes, and then you'll go back in if they like it, and you'll pitch them and their boss, and then you'll go back home and do more stuff, and then you'll pitch them, their boss, and the studio, and it becomes a long process, So you can, it's called chasing projects. You can chase a project like that, which we did that like on a lot of things. We chased a lot of projects, and we're on the 1 yard line with it would come down to like us and one other writer for a lot of things. And sometimes you get the job, more often you don't get the job. And when you don't get the job, you start to realize, God, I just spent collectively 3 months of time working on this job that I didn't get. Mm-hmm. When I've been better served spending 3 months writing a brand new script. Or doing something that I control. So you'd be writing stuff, and then your agent manager would get together and first decide if they liked it or not. And if they liked it, they'd figure out how they were going to present it to, the movie community at large. and they pick a time to go out with it, and they send it to the people they think will like it. And you hope that you find the right producer, and that the right producer has a deal with the right studio, or the right producer has a connection with the right actor or filmmaker to put a package together, to make your movie.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's dive into the Possession of Micheal King. Maybe you can kind of give us some details about, where did that idea come from, and then how did you get that film financed and made?
So the idea, I suppose the idea probably came from a lot of different places. Stemming all the way back to the fact that I've always loved, horror films since I was a kid. I had also, but more specifically, I wanted to do a movie in this vein or in this genre, if you will, because I knew I could do it less expensively. I knew if I was going to direct this myself, it had to be something that someone would take a shot for me to direct. The specific idea of it, I had an idea for a movie kind of like a horror version of Memento. Where you have the opening of the film is this guy who's in an alleyway, and he's covered in blood, and it's not his own blood, and he has no idea who he is or how he got there. And as the story unfolds, you start to realize this guy is possessed by some kind of demonic entity. And as he, starts to realize who he is and what happened, he finds out that this is something that he did to himself, that he went looking into this realm. This happened to himself, and, the minute he finds out that the demon forced him to kill his own family and all of those around him, the same thing happens to him all over again. The people that he's gotten close to through the course of this story, he ends up massacring. And the end of the movie, he's once again left in the same spot, covered in blood. The demons wiped his memory with no idea who he is or how he got here again. And you realize this is this eternal chain that this guy has been on again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So I came up with a whole story for that, and I pitched it to a buddy of mine, and he said it's really cool. He's like, but the thing that I'm really interested in is how this guy did this to himself. He's like, I think that's really cool, like how this guy possessed himself in the first place, and like what was it that he was doing or looking for? And I started to think about that. And it led me down the road of thinking about, if I do this as a documentary filmmaker, I can shoot this doc style. As a first-time director, it might be easier for me. I can shoot it cheaper on crappier cameras. It doesn't have to look as pretty. I can make mistakes, and the mistakes will look right in this kind of a movie. It's more forgiving. So, and then I realized it's like in the character of this guy, I always loved, the Shining. And I thought it would be really cool to do The Shining from the point of view of Jack Torrance, the Jack Nicholson character. What would it be like if you are the guy, that's becoming possessed? Nobody's really done that before in a possession movie from the point of view of the guy that it's happening to. Like can sit there and scientifically be telling us what's happening to him. So I dove into that, down that path. I'm very research intense. So I did a lot of research. I found a lot of arcane manuscripts. I found things overseas, that I had translated. I wanted, the rituals and spells that this guy was getting into to be things that we hadn't really seen before. And I wanted them to be as authentic as possible with a slight modern twist, like, what would be the modern equivalent of some of these things from, 1,000 to 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I wrote the script, and
at this point, as you're writing it as a found footage film.
I'm writing it as a found footage film. Found footage is very, very hot at the time. Writing as a found footage film. I finished the script. We go out with the script. There's a ton of interest, but nobody bites on it. Nobody wants to give me the money for it. I find this.
And at this point, have you attached yourself as the director? So you're sending the script out and saying it's a package. You have to hire me as the director. Or you're just sending the script out.
Yeah, I'm sending the script out, with me attached as a director. And then getting to the point where it's like, my agent manager, like, look, if somebody wants to make it, but they won't give you a shot, will you sell the script? Will you? And I was like, I really want to direct this movie. But I do need to feed my family and I need to eat, and so I suppose if that's an opportunity, like, let's not completely ignore it, but, I really want to make this happen. As time passes, of course, and, nothing's happening, you become more interested in that perspective. Sure. Maybe I would do that. But what happened is, this company, Content Films, had just done this movie, The Pact, which was at Sundance. They made it for $500,000, did really well for them. A producer friend of mine brought this project to them. They loved it. And they're like, you know what? We love it, but we want to do it as a movie. We don't want to do it as a found footage film. So, if you're interested in rewriting it as a film and we see what that looks like, then maybe we'll roll forward and make this movie and let you direct it. So I rewrote the whole script as a movie. And of course, in the process of doing that, got really excited about doing this movie as a movie. It's like no longer am I trapped in the confines of everything has to be motivated by the character and the camera. It's like if I want to express, emotion, I can zoom in and I can pop in on something for a close-up, and, it doesn't have to be motivated, and I can, do these really cool shots, and I can find interesting ways of shooting it and getting into the character and, kind of get outside that point of view. So I really started to eat it up, and I wrote the script, and gave it to these guys, and they loved it. And we brought a line producer on, and she's like, God, it's going to be tough to do this movie for $500,000. That's, if it's found footage, it would be easier to do it. But now that you're shooting it cinematically, and the one thing about the Possession of Micheal King is you'll notice, like a lot of low budget horror films, there's a reason they always take place in the haunted house. The haunted house, the farmhouse, the asylum, the place, you have one location, one spot. You get your crews there, you get all your stuff there, you set up, everything, and you stay there for as many days as you shoot. And it saves you so much money. With this story, by the nature of it, that this guy is traveling all over to all of these different people in different places, I had like 16 or 17 locations, So, it was difficult every time you do a company move to pack up everything. Everybody's on the clock. You're paying everybody, and it's chewing up half your day just to move from one location to another location. You don't even end up shooting anything. As a director, you're like, ripping your hair out. It's like, how the hell am I going to make this happen? So it was really going to be tight. I was figuring out, God, is there any way I can make this happen when the movie The Devil Inside came out? I don't know if you remember this found footage horror movie, The Devil Inside. Whatever you think about the movie, it was not a good movie by any means, but it did incredibly at the box office. And suddenly, everybody in Hollywood is narrow-sighted, as they always have been, immediately wanted a found footage possession film. And, for the first time in my career, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And within that week, I had 5 studio offers to do the movie as the original way that I wrote it, as a found footage film, and to do the movie with triple the budget as the budget that Content Film wanted to shoot it as an actual movie. So, it was it was tough because I'd gone, down the road. It's like, okay, like now I can shoot this movie cinematically and I can make it look different. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to feel like I was going backwards as a filmmaker, and losing like a lot of the stuff that I'd realized along the way, to go back to this earlier version of the script. But, it was a much better opportunity to make a better movie overall.
Yeah. So what do you think, just put on your studio executive hat, because I get a lot of these types of questions. What do you think of found footage films right now? Are they still something people are looking for, or has it kind of faded?
It's like, look, I went into this film. I'm not a found footage fan. I'm not it's weird to hear that from a guy that made a found footage movie. You'd think, oh, this guy loves the genre, loves the stuff. It's like, I love horror films. it wouldn't have been the first, choice of film, but, for my specific reasons of getting a movie off the ground, it was the right thing for me to do. I went in with a very specific game plan on this movie. I didn't want to make a movie that looked like Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch or something with a shaky camera that's all over the place and you're nauseous and people are like coming out and disappearing and like that kind of stuff that you're watching it and you're like, ugh, like it's so annoying that this movie, they've gone out of their way to make it look so crappy. It's like, just like, clean it up a little bit because I can't stand watching it. So I said to everyone involved, I'm like, look, you guys, I want to make this movie as cinematic as possible. I think we should take a note from Chronicle, which while Chronicle had 15 times the budget of our movie, they made their movie look like a movie, and it's like while they actually dropped kind of, the doc style about, halfway, 3/4 of the way through the movie, while they were doing it at the beginning, the shots were still pretty. They color corrected it. They made it look cinematic, and it became the kind of movie that you can go back and watch it again and kind of get lost in this idea of I'm watching a movie and not trapped in the confines of I'm watching this documentary. And so I very much wanted to do that. I wanted that, which is why I found Phil Parmet, who shot the movie, who's wonderful and has shot a lot of big movies, but he comes from a documentary background. And I said, Phil, I want this movie, I want you to light it, and I want it to look, look as nice and as beautiful as we can make it look, while in the confines of we have one camera in this room and we have to stick with this camera, and it's going to be a wide shot because I can't move the camera for the whole movie, and I need to be able to capture everything that I need on this camera. So you need to light this room and hide your lights somehow, but let's go into this with that in mind and try to do something, that people can go back and look at this movie and not be frustrated, by the poor quality of it, but still be able to point their finger back and say, oh, wow, I kind of forgot I was watching a documentary about halfway through here because I got caught up in the character and caught up in the story, and I felt like I was just watching a movie. But if you go back and technically pull the movie apart, every single shot is motivated by, the main character and him carrying a camera or placing a camera. So
let's just jump back. So you now have these offers, these 4 offers, and just to do some quick math, you're talking about in the slightly less than $2 million budget, they're basically going to allow you to shoot this movie, and then they're all okay with you being a director, and that's the direction you ended up going.
Well, it's like, and they were all different. They were all very different. I had one offer from Sony Screen Gems, wanted to do the movie. And, they were going to bump the movie up to like a $15-20 million movie.
And still you as a director.
Well, in all of these projects, no one will make, unless you're, at least in my experience, unless you're a real director and you've directed 10 movies and, you're Tim Burton or it's like, they come on board with, okay, we're going to buy the screenplay and we are going to go down the road with you as a director, but we are not going to make this contract contingent upon you directing in case there's a problem or in case you prove to us that you can't handle this. We want to have the ability to eject you from the movie and still own the movie. What I had done with Micheal King that I didn't mention to you yet was that, I had a buddy of mine that also got financing for his movie around the same time, or a little bit before I did actually. And he had a whole crew together, and his cameraman just got back from Steadicam school and wanted to put some time in on the camera. So I said, why don't you let me shoot, a scene from my movie so I have something to show people that I can actually direct this movie. So we went over to his house. And I shot. There's a scene in the movie where Micheal King is confronting himself on his television, and he's losing his mind, and he's sitting there, wondering, have I gone completely mad or something happening to me? And he ends up interviewing himself with the television set, and he ends up having this conversation back and forth. It's a much longer version of it in the screenplay than what has ended up being in the finished film. But we shot that scene, and it did a lot of things for me. One, a lot of people that read that scene were like, man, this is a really twisted, fucked up scene, and it's really cool, but how the hell are you going to shoot this? I don't understand how it's going to work. It showed that, and it also was really creepy and scary and original and effective. We had a great actor, a gentleman by the name of John Piper Ferguson, who agreed to do it. And I believe that it was shooting like that scene and that kind of short, which really, I put that up on a website that I built for the movie. It helped secure my position as the director, you know, by having something that they could point to and say, okay, like this guy can handle the movie. You know, he can cut a scene together. You know, we're going to be able to make it work. But, you know, back to your original question, nobody would, you know, carte blanche, give me the keys to the kingdom and say you're locked in as the director. And there were different budget ranges everywhere. Like the Sony Screen Gems deal, they put a time clock on it. It was a good deal for me. They wanted to make a big movie. They had big distribution behind it, but something felt weird to me about the deal. I had never met these guys. I didn't know what thoughts they had on the script or about the movie. And, you know, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had my whole team on the phone, and we had to make a decision that night. I said, I'll do the deal contingent upon a creative meeting with these guys, you know? So I won't, you know, I won't negotiate against them on any of these other offers. We'll only negotiate with them in good faith that we have this creative meeting. So I sat down with them to have this creative meeting, and it was the most bizarre thing in the world. They're like, yeah, so, you know, what we're thinking is that, you know, Micheal King's wife was killed by a possessed serial killer, and he's like a detective that's on the trail of this possessed serial killer, but the possessed serial killer was killed, but he's trying to like raise the possessed serial killer again, and it's kind of like Rosemary's Baby, and all of these different people that he's going to, these different demonologists and stuff, like they're all really in on it, and he doesn't know that, but what they're really trying to do is like raise the possessed serial killer in him, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, like
check, please.
I don't understand. You know, one, that's the most ridiculous, dumb idea I've heard in my life. But two, I'm happy to write that idea for you if you're going to pay me to write that. But three, that has nothing to do with the script that I wrote. Like, why do you need my script for that thing that you just pitched to me? You know, and I am so happy that I didn't just take this deal. You know, even because it's like, sure, you want to make a big studio $15 to $20 million movie. That idea is never going to get off the ground. And then you're going to own my project. My little movie that I wanted to direct is just going to sit somewhere. And I'm back to, you know, well, sure, I'll get paid for something, but I'm back to square one.
Yeah.
So there were, you know, with each of these, you know, I was lucky that I was in a position that I had a lot of places that wanted to make this movie. There were pros and cons to all of them. You know, and you know, it's always the shifting target. Things are out of your hands. You know, you never know how it's going to turn out. You know, like the second you sign a deal, things always change. You know, you should know that going into it. You know, it's like, oh yes, like this movie is financed and we have the money and it's a sure thing, you know, as you sign the paper and like, you know, the next day, oh yeah, no, the financing disappeared and whatever changed and the studio did this, but it's like, it always happens, you know? So, you know, you have to deliver good material again and again and again and again. And, you know, there's truth to that old saying that you got to be in the right place at the right time, you know, or you got to stay in the game long enough to get yourself in the right place at the right time. And, you know, I think part of it was, man, I felt like I was so overdue for a break. That I had been on the 1 yard line again and again and again and again, and just could not get, you know, a movie, you know, off the ground like this. And this one,
I'm sorry, keep going.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. I want to go back something as we start to wrap up here. You know, you mentioned a treatment you wrote for a superhero script. One of the things that I always find so interesting is a lot of people think the studio executive positions are all about the networking, and that's certainly a big component. But whenever you talk to people that have worked in development, they do have a real good sense about why stuff gets made. And I think that's something that so many people that are not, like people always say, should I move to Hollywood and this? And it's like just being in Hollywood, you get some of that stuff. And I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit about, you know, the subtleties of what makes a concept marketable. And, you know, I get so many emails from people that are outside of the LA, you know, and they've got these heartfelt story ideas. And I read them and I think, you know, it's never going to be a movie. It might be the greatest script ever written, but it's never going to be a movie. And I wonder if you can just speak to that. What are some problems and maybe just tell us about some of the things that you see that make a concept a winning concept. I mean, I think Micheal King is a prime example. Is one of the things when I was watching it is it just, you know, there is some original concept, you know, this idea of, you're right, I've never seen a horror movie where it's from the angle of the thing, and it's like getting that hook is just such an important part of any successful script. But anyways, just speak to that a little bit about, you know, what makes a good concept.
It's a really good question, and it's one of those things that I feel like it's like a hard lesson that you learn, and it was a hard lesson for me to learn, you know, coming from my own world of, well, I really love this story, and I want to make this movie, and I really love this story, and I want to make this movie, to someone saying to me, you know, who's going to see that movie, you know? Who's going to garner? You're spending how much money on this movie? If it's $100 million movie, then you need to make, you know, $300 million to make your money back. So that means that everybody has to go see this movie. It has to be a tremendous blockbuster, you know, and for it to be a tremendous blockbuster, you need men, women, and children, you know. So you can't do a hard R movie that costs that much money, or you can't do a movie that doesn't have a strong female lead or supporting character, because where's the female audience? Or, you know, there's no love story. Where's the love story that's going to draw in? Or and it's, you know, all of these things that become like the traditional, you know, studio exec question. Who's the girl? Where's the action? Where's the money shot? Where's the, you know, it's like all of these things. You realize that, you know, sure, there is kind of a formula to how things are put together. You know, who is your audience is such an important question. And who is your audience that's going to garner the budget for this movie? You know, and what if it's a crime movie? You know, you're looking at this kind of a budget with this lead. Who's the lead character? How many guys are there in Hollywood right now that are big enough names that are going to get this movie financed? Oh, there's 3? Okay, so are you going to spend all your time on this movie that you have 3 chances? If you don't get one of these 3 guys, your movie's not getting made because the numbers don't add up, you know? And it becomes a really different way of looking at filmmaking. You know, it's like you don't make really expensive movies that have really limited audiences unless, you have a passion project and you run the studio. But it's like that's who's going to make that decision. You know, if Spielberg wants to make a movie about his childhood imaginary friend, he's going to make that movie. You know, but that's the one person that can make that movie.
I even saw an interview with him about getting Lincoln financed and getting Lincoln made and how he had trouble getting something like Lincoln made. So it's like everybody on the planet struggles to get their movies made. There's no easy, I mean, making a movie is incredibly difficult no matter who you are.
Let me tell you, it's, you know, one of the things, you know, I've been facing, and it's just such a double-edged sword, is that you know, I wrote this movie, and you know, there's criticism that, you know, this movie, found footage movie, possession movie, it's like, can't Hollywood do something different? Even though I feel like I put a very different spin on this movie and this type of movie, you know, you get that backlash, and the movies that are coming from my agency now for me to direct that are being offered to me are the most mundane horror films, it's like, okay, well, we're in the morgue and it's a zombie in the morgue that comes out and kills or we're in like a house and there's a serial killer and like, God, these are all terrible. And then you write something, that's tragically original, and you put it out there and you're like, God, okay, so I'm really excited about this idea. This is so badass and it's such a great twist and nobody's done this and it's like The Matrix, and nobody gets it. They're like, well, what movie is it like? And it's like, well, no, the whole point is it's not like all these other movies. Well, that's the problem, because I have no idea how to gauge it. Who's going to see it? What can I compare it to? I can't compare it to any other movie. Then I have no idea like how much, if it's going to be successful or not. And sadly, that's what the trope of what happens in Hollywood. It becomes incredibly difficult to get an original concept off the ground because people don't understand originality. They only understand, okay, well, like my example with The Devil Inside. The Devil Inside came out, terrible movie, did really well at the box office. I got 5 offers on my movie, which for the year before that, I didn't get 1 offer, And it's like, people are like, they looked at my movie, they're like, oh, I don't know, this found footage, this guy's going possessed, like, I don't know, does that work? And then somebody does something kind of similar and it works really well, then everybody wants my movie. And then, after you make the movie, people are like, yeah, but, somebody else made a movie that was kind of like that. It's like, I know.
Yeah. So let's talk about what is your goals for the future? What do you want to kind of keep doing, and how are you going to kind of get those goals, achieve those goals?
So I have a movie that I'm working on right now. It's called Rome, Rider of Another Mortal, ROAM, which is an original concept that I just finished. It's like a dark sci-fi thriller. It's a twist on Frankenheimer's Seconds, if you ever saw the film Seconds or read the book. And I'm about to shoot a short film, like proof of concept short film based on the script. And I just put up a website for it. It's kind of similar to what I did with Micheal King. I built a website. I did a fake trailer for it. I shot like a little piece of it. I'm doing the same thing with this. The website is called roammovie.com, ROAM movie.com. And what I'm going to do with it, it's in the very beginning stages now, but I'm going to be posting everything from like soup to nuts, from concept to completion. We're going to start storyboarding in a week, and I'll start putting the storyboards up. So anybody that's interested in really watching the process of where the script starts, how things change as we go along, how, some of the first shots that we do coming up, I'm going to put all that stuff online so you can really watch the process from beginning to end as I make that film.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes too. So if anybody's in their car or something, they can find the show notes, and I'll link directly to that website.
Cool. Thanks. And then the other project I'm doing is called The King of Sting, and it's based on a book, which you can check out on Amazon. It's a really cool story. It's kind of like Catch Me If You Can type of story. True story of this guy, Craig Glazier, who wrote the book as well. And I'm in the middle of negotiating that deal right now for me to write and direct that. So what's great about that is that, I didn't want to just jump into another horror film. I'd love to do another horror film, but I don't want to just be the horror film guy. So this will give me an opportunity to do something very different from that, so that hopefully I'll be able to, have a choice, and I'm not just getting sent bad horror scripts for the rest of the day.
Yeah, sure. So what's the best way? I think we're recording this on August 25th, and I think the release of The Possession of Micheal King is this week. What's the best way for people to catch that movie if they want to watch it? Is it going to be available theatrically, and then obviously the downloads?
Yeah, so it hit theaters on Friday. Okay. So it's in the theaters now. It's a limited run though, so it's not in a lot of theaters. You can look up to see if it's around you somewhere, and then it comes out VOD. I think what's the date today?
The day is the 25th. So
yeah, I think it comes out tomorrow VOD. Okay. So it'll be in some theaters still, and it will also be hitting VOD tomorrow. And then I think the DVD comes out, probably shortly after that. So I'd say look for it VOD starting tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. But this will be released probably next Monday, so by the time this is released, it should be available online. So perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with you? Obviously, we will link to the RomeMovie.com, but what's just another? Are you on Twitter? Do you have a blog or anything?
Yeah, my Twitter account is at David Fu F-U-J-U-N-G at David Fu Young.
Okay.
And I've been tweeting a little bit, so they can follow updates and stuff that I'm doing on there if they'd like to.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll link to your Twitter account as well, so people can find that. So, well, David, this has been a great interview. Lots of good information. I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. So, thank you very much for coming on and talking with me.
Thanks so much, Ashley. I really appreciate being here and you taking the time for all of your insightful questions and comments, and for checking the movie out.
Yeah, thank you.
It's fun to talk about it. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Just a quick plug for my email and fax blast query service. Just in the last year, I've optioned 4 scripts, sold 1 script, and got 1 paid writing assignment. All of this came from using my own email and fax blast query service. Here's how it works. First, you join SYS Select. Then you post your logline and query letter in the SYS Select forum. I will review your logline and query letter and help you make them as good as they can possibly be. Then you purchase the blast and I send it out for you. The emails are sent as if they're from your email address, so all the replies go directly back to you. You can exclude companies if there are specific companies you don't want to send to. Check out www.sellingyourscreenplayselect.com to learn more. In the next episode of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Craig Wenman. Craig is a Canadian writer who broke into the business while still living in Canada. He's got some great insight into the business and talks very openly about how he broke in and continues to work as a screenwriter. So stay tuned for that episode next week. In this week's Writing Words section, I want to touch on David's career and how he got started. I actually think that working in the business, and specifically in script development, and then working your way up, is probably the single best strategy that you can have if you want to be a screenwriter. If I were to guess, I would say this is probably the single biggest way that people break into the business. You heard what he said. Once he had a little bit of heat on his career, it was pretty easy for him to get an agent and manager because he already knew tons of people in the business. This doesn't substitute, of course, for writing a marketable screenplay. But as we talked about in the interview, working in development for years is a great way to really understand what is marketable. You really can't fully understand this until you've been in the business for a while and talked with producers and really have seen for yourself what gets made and why it gets made. So if you're in a position where you can take a low-paying job that requires tons of hours, I would highly recommend that you do it. It's brutal work, but it's a great way to learn the business. Notice, too, how he broke in his original first day. He literally just walked onto the set and started working. There's no nepotism or favoritism there. It's something we could all do if we had the gumption. Anyway, that's our show. Thanks for listening.